Hello everybody and welcome to the Warcradlestudios question and answers, the first session of 2019. And we hope to do many more of these over the coming months.
Well, some.
A few.
At least more than one.
Some of you will know Stu already. And I'm Chris. And let's crack on with some questions, shall we?
Why not? Why the devil not?
I think we've classified these under all the different types of games or different games that we produce, and we've got some general questions to start us off.
I was going to say, we've categorised them under the different games we do. So let's start with the general ones.
Yeah. And general questions, of course. So shall we start there? Stu, would you like to kick us off?
No, I tell you what, you can do. So Brett JJ. I don't know if that's any relation to Abrams. But yeah, Brett JJ, do you want to do his question first?
Okay, back in one of the original Q&As, you mentioned faction-specific cheese wheels. Any idea when?
No. Oh, yes. No, okay. Absolutely. I did. Is there a question there? Or just that we mentioned it?
Any idea when? You want to know when he can get them?
When they're coming out.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if I talked about faction-specific cheese wheels, but I think we were talking generally about how Warcradle's approach to things like beta testing and so on goes, where, see, the difference between an alpha test and a beta test is more the alpha test, which is usually within the studio with a smaller group, is about defining in broad strokes how a particular game or box set or something is structured. With a beta test, that's the point where it's more about refining. Once that fundamental picture has been established, it's about then refining the different elements to make sure that they're the best that they can possibly be, while still being true to the vision for the game or the board game or whatever it is that we established in the alpha test. What I said was that, so replacing...
I was hoping there was going to be a point.
Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. What I said was that, obviously, when something gets to a beta test, we aren't going to be doing something like replacing all the dice with cheese wheels or anything like that. I am hoping that this is tongue-in-cheek because I can categorically say there are no plans to release Warcradle patented cheese wheels.
Any news on the app? I presume that's a game app for building armies and for looking at the cards and something that's a bit isolated rather than just having a look on the website for those things.
So you've been looking into the app quite a bit?
Yes, we've done quite a lot of speccing out for the app just to see really what is going to be best to have in there. And actually, the more you look into it, the more stuff you're going to need to have in there, or certainly want to make sure that the app is beneficial to people playing the game and actually increases the enjoyment.
And it's a Warcradle app, isn't it?
Yes.
Rather than a game-specific app.
Yep.
How it's looking is a Warcradle app, that within that app we will have the different games, and you would pick your game and then it will take you into... So it's going to be quite an advanced bit of kit.
Yep.
But we understand, while we aren't necessarily looking into something that you have to use in a game, and I know there are some games like Mansions of Madness, you need to have the app in order to play the game. It's difficult to play the game without the app. We're not looking to do something like that, but certainly a companion app, something that you can put your collections in, that can hold latest versions of the rules, FAQ, unit cards, all of that kind of stuff. That's really the kind of thing we're looking at. We're not looking at something that's necessarily got like a dice roller in, or that you use to actually play the game per se, but things that you can record your games. Oh, I'm playing a game against, and whoever you're playing against, sort of match up fleet lists and factions and whatever else you need to do and want to do for the games. That's the kind of thing we're looking at. It is still in development, and I think we have a ways to go yet.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is to make sure that it's future-proof, so that if we're going to use it for all of the games that we're going to be producing, that it's open enough that it can take all the information for all the different types of games we have.
So when we've released all of the games we're ever going to release, then we're going to do an app. That's the safest one, I think, isn't it? Oh, okay. That's not what you meant. Okay, right. Next. I'll ask you one now. Yeah. Any chance of this is from Jens Mortensen. That previous question was Sam Jones, by the way. And
Sam.
And also we were asked that question by Mike Pierce as well. He asked about the app as well. Yeah, so Jens Mortensen asks, any chance of non-game related merchandise, like apparel or artwork?
That's actually something we've been asked a few times, and it certainly is something that we aren't opposed to doing. We've got a lot of work at the moment developing the games, and that's our main priorities, is making and developing those games.
I think we're quite good at making resin miniatures and obviously detailing up plastic miniatures and developing rules and shaping worlds and things. I think those are the things that we're quite good at. Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. No false modesty. I'm not so good at mug creation or bomber jacket sewing or anything like that. So we would have to, because that's an area that we're not focused on as a business, it is something that we will have to look into further, but it is something we want to do. We do want to do, I like the idea of t-shirts, I like the idea of, I think kind of apparel, which it looks like something you would want to wear anyway, that it's a nice piece of whatever it is, or you'd want to use, and it's not just like a giant Wild West Exodus logo on your chest and that's it. And I think it needs to look reasonable. Yeah. Or like you're part of a bowling team, as our shirts look like. But
and our shoes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they can't see us below the waist.
Yeah. They don't know if I'm lying or not then, do they?
Assume that he is.
Shall we move on?
Yes. So Alex BP, does he have shares? Okay. Alex BP asks, will there be a roadmap released for each game franchise or a single unified one for all Warcradle product ranges? Without specific dates, to give people an idea as to where things stand, a general idea of where we can start to expect things to happen in relation to each other. Okay, so we were, in fact, actually earlier on today, we had a strategy meeting. We've got a phenomenal amount coming out and in development for 2019, 2020 and 2021, which is what we were looking at. Most of 2019 is set in stone because obviously we're in a manufacturer, that's how we work. We don't tend to work, what should we release next month? That's not really how we work. So in broad strokes, we're able to talk about things, and under specific games, we can talk about things. But we can't, so for example, we can't do a Warcradle release schedule because you would see lots of big gaps in it because there are things that we have coming out, games, IPs, and all sorts of things that will be coming out that we've not announced to anybody in any shape or form. They are secret. So that wouldn't really be of much use, particularly if then something comes out and it nudges on other things. So what we're going to do is, under each game, as we talk about the game, you'll have a general idea of what the order is. So, for example, Dystopian Wars. So Dystopian Wars, it should be knowledge to the community that it's in beta. And the thing about a beta test is, to be honest, its interest and appeal is relatively narrow, because being involved in a beta, even loosely, there is some work involved to get the most out of the beta, to enjoy the beta test for what it is. There is some work involved, and it's not for everybody. In fact, it's not for most people.
Yeah, it's not just playing the game, is it? You've really got to think about how the game's running, think about feedback, try and give that feedback as succinct and as positive as possible. Yeah, to make sure that it's positively affecting the game and moving it forward in the right direction.
Yeah, because the point of the beta test isn't, and obviously I'm aware some people do use it for this, but it wasn't to give you a kind of a half-baked version of the final rules just to get you guys playing. That's not the point of the beta test. Every game that's played with a beta that doesn't actually give feedback, for me, is pointless. It's about making the game better. If you just want to play games of Dystopian Wars, don't play the beta. Just wait. Just wait until the game comes out later on this year. I'm happy to say it will be later on this year. Dystopian Wars will come out, and you will get the proper, full version of the game with all the bells and naval whistles that you can imagine. If, on the other hand, you want to be involved in a process, then by all means, jump on board with the beta, give feedback. We've already had a load of great feedback, and the game is changing shape based on the feedback that we've been given. So in terms of a roadmap, alpha test, beta test, which is an open public beta, and we will try and do that with all of our tabletop war games. We will try and have that open beta test to involve people, because we think that's an exciting way to do things. Then we'll move on to, once that's out, we close the doors on the beta. The beta will still be up there for people to get a sense of where the game is. And we will then bring the beta back in-house, do some final polishing, some final tweaks, with a view to then releasing the actual game several months down the line. And by several, I don't mean 3, I mean several, many months down the line, okay? More than 3, yeah, less than 12, yeah, there will be when it comes out. 13 is right out. Yeah, so that's, in terms of a timeline, that's about as much as I think it's fair for us to commit to. In terms of what we release for the things, I'm quite happy to talk about under each of the sections, because there will be questions on what models are coming out and when. I'm quite happy to talk about our intentions on things. But again, because a lot of what we produce is either resin or plastic, or is a printed material, or especially when it's all 3, those kind of things, any one with all those different moving parts, there can be a delay in manufacture or
it's
an
just
issue.
A lead time.
Yeah.
These things take time to produce, especially in significant numbers when it's talking about resin miniatures, because of the curing times and things. It can take some time to build up a stock of those miniatures for a release.
And there's nothing worse than releasing a 3rd edition of a game and not having enough stock to support that 3rd edition of the game, and because that will then just damage the community, because people get very excited about wanting to get involved, but then they can't buy the stuff anywhere, and that's an issue for people, because then they see some people get it, some people don't, and that's not how we want to do it.
Yeah.
So when the game comes out, it will come out with all properly supported with all the material that you need to get going. That's the intention anyway.
And let's move on to Firestorm Armada.
Let's.
So we've got a couple of questions here from Mark Knight. He's asked, when can we expect the open beta for Firestorm Armada? And he's also asked, what parallels will it have to Dystopian Wars in terms of system mechanics?
Okay, so we don't like to run 2 betas at the same time. I don't think it's good for the communities.
It's not good for me.
It's certainly not good for the studio, because I'll be honest, we want to give our full attention to all the beta feedback.
And it's quite intense.
Yeah, we talk every single week and we go through all of the feedback for things, so we scrutinise everything. So we want to make sure that we're doing that fully for Dystopian Wars, and then we'll move on to the next one. The next one is going to be Firestorm. So
absolutely.
Once the Dystopian Wars beta is over and Dystopian Wars is moving towards a production, a release, around that point, which will be later in this year, we will then do a Firestorm Armada beta. So we will announce a formal date once the Dystopian Wars beta is ended. Not immediately after, but sometime afterwards. And the beta will start this year. Previous editions of Firestorm Armada and previous editions of Dystopian Wars have been really quite similar games. Yeah. One was just set in space and one was, over the years, the 2 games have diverged. They've become more their own unique thing. We're continuing that trend. So in the same way that Dystopian Wars is developing in a particular direction, Firestorm will develop in another direction.
Yeah. And that brings us on to some questions from Ramey Peter, who's asked a number of things about how much of the old background are we planning to retain, what scale of diversity should we expect in the new system, such as, on scale from cruiser to cruiser, can you customize ships, that type of thing. So he's asking a lot of very specific questions about the new edition of Firestorm Armada. It's difficult to answer those questions at the moment because we don't know.
I think it's worth mentioning though, so there's some interesting things regarding Firestorm Armada. So for example, it could be that, are the ships actually that size in relation to each other, or are those models in the game just representative of those things and they're only approximations? So yes, a frigate is smaller than a battleship, but actually is a frigate exactly 5 times or whatever as small? Or are they, as I say, representative of the size, the comparative size and things? In which case, scale and comparisons to each other isn't quite so much of a hard and fast thing as it is in a game like Dystopian Wars or Exodus or something like that, where the actual size of the things relative to each other is really essential. That said, battleships should be big things in the game. Frigates and so on should be little things, and there will be a variance of things in between.
Yep. Renee has also asked, what do we imagine the model count to be? And I think I'm fairly safe to say that, like the other games that we have so far produced, we want to be able to make it appeal to as many people as possible. Therefore, we're going to make a game that you can play with a handful of miniatures, and you can play with an enormous table of miniatures that will last you all weekend, and it will be as enjoyable in both ways.
Some freedom of unit choice as well. We don't like to be too prescriptive. So the idea of actually, if somebody wants to take 2 or 3 battleships and kind of do like a Galactica and Pegasus kind of style of thing where you're kind of hopping from place to place, that's fine. If somebody wants to do a swarm thing with loads and loads of cruisers, ships of the line and so on, that'll be fine too. So the model count will vary depending on what you're taking, factions, and the size of game. So there's no hard and fast rule on that.
Super. I think that rounds us off for Firestorm Armada.
Okay, next.
Should we move on to Dystopian Wars?
Certainly, Dystopian Wars.
So let's start with Danny Buck. Something emerging from the forum about the differences between factions in Dystopian Wars, where there'd be different stats for the same weapon system for different factions, e.g. turrets, broadsides and torpedoes.
Right, one of the things that we're being very clear on in Dystopian Wars is we're trying to make sure that we don't want to have, this is a heavy gun turret, and actually the heavy gun turret is different depending on what ship or what faction it's for. That's not necessary. There's lots of other ways to differentiate between the factions and between the ships. So a heavy gun turret or heavy gun battery will be the same no matter what ship it's on. If it's called a heavy gun battery, it will have a very specific profile, and everybody will have the same profile that has access to that weapon. Same as rocket batteries and so on. There will be heavy and light or non-heavy. There will also be a whole range of faction-specific weapons. So things like the heat lance, things like the cryo generators, and all sorts of weird and wonderful equipment. Particle beams. Weird and wonderful technology that will add to the differences. And the classes themselves, a battleship for the Latin Alliance will have, its weapons will be placed in different areas. So different fire arcs, it will have different, so for example, Latin Alliance ships, they launch their torpedoes from the rear, there's fins at the rear on the back of the French battleship does, and so on. So they're all going to be differences there, but the actual weapons and the terminology, we're not going to have the same things with the same name, have different stats. That's a needless complication. So no is the answer to your question, I think.
And we've got another one from Danny. Will there be differences in the number and placement of weapon systems on the same class of vessel? I think we've just answered that.
We just covered that.
That's fine. Steve Tidwell, a couple of questions for me. When can we expect to see Dystopian Wars released, and when can we expect to see new models?
Well, the answer to both is the same. So we will release the 3rd edition once the beta test is finished. We take it back in-house, refine it, polish it, and then it goes into production. That process, depending on how much polishing and how much production is needed, could be anything from a few months to 6 months. It is our intention to get Dystopian Wars into the shops this year. That's what we're intending to do. When the game comes out, then we'll start releasing models for it. There's very little point us releasing models for Dystopian Wars because for 99% of the people out there, Dystopian Wars isn't out yet. The beta test is obviously a very specific thing for the community and for a niche of the community, in fact, but it's not the game. The game isn't out yet. When the game comes out, then you will see the website. It'll have its own Dystopian Wars website, and that'll be fully interactive with all sorts of faction information and artwork and a whole resource for all the fans of Dystopian Wars. So that will be coming. But at the moment, as the game's not out, it's a beta test site, and that's where you get all the resources. So soon.
Excellent. Sean Morgan, what about the free rulebook we signed up for?
What about the free rulebook they signed up for?
Well, that will be shipped out as soon as it's written, published.
Yeah. So as soon as the game comes out, or when the game is actually coming into the shops, absolutely, we're going to do that print run of the rulebook, specially designed there'll be a special edition of it for the people that have done their photographs and other bits and pieces for their free rulebook sign up, and they'll be shipped out. We did the same with Wild West Exodus, and we're going to do that with Dystopian Wars. And actually, we may even do it for Firestorm. That's something we're talking about as well. So if it's well received by you, and if the community values it, it's something that we're happy to support.
Absolutely. Brett JJ, will Dystopian Wars have a 2-player starter set like the Wild West Exodus and Red Oak?
Yes.
If so, when should we start lurking around shops? So again, that ties in. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a 2-player starter set.
Yeah, start. I mean, the summer can be quite, beastly, or the winter, depending on where you are in the world. And so, don't stand out in the elements for months and months and months. You can start lurking towards the end of the middle of the year.
Excellent. I think that covers us for Dystopian Wars.
What's next?
Wild West Exodus.
WWX.
Let's move swiftly along to that, shall we? So, Matt Knott has asked, plans for organised play kits, etc.? We have organised play.
Do we have plans?
We have it. It's already on the resources section under the Wild West Exodus website. So you can find it there. It's the Gunslinger Organised Play Pack.
Yep.
We've also got a series of additional scenarios with some very interesting side peculiarities.
Perils.
Perils, that's a good word. That will...
It's not only a good word, it's the actual word. It is what they call
perils. Yes. That will add a bit of spice to your games.
Yeah, the organised play kit that you can purchase as well has a load of special poker chips, as well as badges.
Pin badges.
Pin badges, yes, indeed. So it works with the free-to-download organised play kit. You can download it right now. In fact, as you're listening to my dulcet tones, you can click download, and it'll be down before I finish speaking.
Excellent. Anthony Robinson, not Tony Robinson, he's someone different. Any ETA on Wild West Exodus 1.09, my lord?
My lord. Really? Okay. So we have talked about. So at the moment the cards are on 1.08.
Yes.
We have a 1.09. We want to update the cards, the unit cards, once a year. We think that's about right.
Yeah.
So we want to do a 1.09 this year. The main rules of the game aren't changing for Wild West Exodus. That's not what 1.09 is. It's about updating the unit cards. We're going to have a forum whereby you can start to give feedback as to what things you think could be looked at, addressed, rebalanced. We're going to do that in the coming months. We're going to have that open for the community to feedback, because community helping shape the games that you guys enjoy, that's the best thing ever. So we want to encourage that wherever possible. So absolutely, we're going to do 1.09, but it's going to be with you helping feedback. That process will start, as I say, in the next few months.
Super. Got another question here from Dingo Modder, who asks, he says, I love the Warcradle Wild West Exodus buildings. I think there's 3 exclamation marks there. Any planned releases for new buildings or similarly stylised terrain?
Yes.
Yes. In fact, we've got some on the release schedule fairly soon, I believe.
We have.
Which will be exciting. And there is another question here about, I think it's from Mike Pierce. Mm-hmm. I've yet to find it in here, but he's asking about other types of terrain. So whether there be other faction-specific terrain or other bits of scattered terrain like the existing resin pieces that Outlaw Miniatures created some time ago.
Yes, there is definitely faction-specific terrain, or faction-inspired, certainly, because the factions in Wild West Exodus are from all sorts of different places in America. They naturally lend themselves to particular types of terrain. Not everything is in Red Oak or that kind of...
it's more terrain-specific than it is faction-specific.
Yes. But were you in that terrain, you would most likely encounter a particular faction more than others. But yes, there is some of that coming. More details to follow.
We've got Hunter Christian has asked, are there eventual plans to incorporate different types of buildings for terrain? Oh, there we go, that are more faction-based. That was the one I couldn't find. So we've answered that one. So he's asking about the different faction terrain. Sam Jones, is there any plan to release a deluxe Wild West Exodus hardback rulebook?
Yes. Yes, we want to do that. It's something we've talked about for a while.
Yes.
Darren has been hard at work producing lots of painting articles and other bits and pieces. We've got a wealth of background information to go into it as well. It is something we want to do. There are some really exciting developments for Wild West Exodus and beyond the Wild West that we will talk about later on in the year. That will have an impact on a hardback rulebook.
Excellent. Mike Pierce has got another one. With the US Gunslinger tourney now at Adepticon, can we expect regional qualifiers for future tourneys leading up to an official US championship? Well, I think we were all pretty much blown away by the response we had for that particular event. Mm-hmm. I think it sold out in about 5 hours, and we then had to increase the numbers a little bit, as much as we could, as much as Adepticon would allow us.
And then it sold out again.
Yeah. So, I think it might be something that we'll have to do going forward, because there are always going to be limited spaces for these types of events. And
I think as the game grows in popularity in the community grows, I think it's natural that you're going to see that kind of thing happening. Our war hosts, which are the war host program, has really started to get underway this the end of last year and now the beginning of this year. They're going to be a big part of that. So I would expect to see much more organised play in 2019 and beyond.
Excellent. We've got a couple of questions from Jens Mortensen, my good friend Jens. He's asked if there are any chance of small bios for unique characters, as there's a lot of backstory and thought put into the characters. Now, that's something that there's a lot of that already exists on the website.
We're actually already doing that. Yeah. So with every release that we do, there's a whole wealth of background information that then gets posted alongside it. So, for example, recently we had Raging Bear, didn't we? Yeah. Raging Bear came out, and so Raging Bear, a little bit more about Raging Bear's story was added, and so on and so on. So there's more information is released as the models
those new releases come out. And he's also asked, any chance of more evolved campaign rules that allow for more character development, both good and bad?
Good and bad campaign rules?
Well, no, character development. So
bad character development. Like oh, I see. Sorry.
Crippling injuries.
I wonder where we were going
from one fight to the next, and then
yes,
there's a lot of work to go into something like that. In fact, it's almost like creating a new game from scratch.
We have the Badlands rules, which add a lot more depth to the game in terms of narrative depth. There are other things in development that could be used to enhance your Exodus games. Can't really talk about them at the moment, but yes, there are plans are afoot for more things. Yes,
and I think that brings us to a close.
Well, this has been fun.
It has.
And
really good questions.
Yeah, the idea is that this is just the first of many Q&A sessions. So I know that we had quite a lot of questions. Please keep asking them. There'll be more opportunities to ask further questions, and we hope to then come back to you and answer your questions at another time in the future.